Shalom and blessings, everyone. Thank you for joining me this morning, or if you're watching later on, pray that this message is a blessing for you wherever you are in your life at the moment. Everyone's on a different part of the walk, but we're all seeking that same destination. So that is what's important, that we continue to lift each other up with encouragement, praise to the Father, knowing that we need each other to help us get through these enduring times, these difficult trials that we all face. Life is not going to be without them. And so we have to learn how to navigate through the storms, through the fire, no matter what is going on, leaning on the Father to guide us through so that we don't receive the scorchment or burnt that we typically see due to fire. So that kind of inspired my talk today. I actually was going to discuss an entirely different topic. And when I was just researching through scripture, to find some different verses to share, I came across a story that I really was not familiar with. And it just was really eye-opening. And I wanted to share it with you because it does come from one of the extra biblical books of Jasher. And not everyone may be familiar with that book. It is obviously included in the Sefer. That's where we get our extra books from. It's also the Apocrypha was part of the 1611 KJV that was removed. Many wonderful scriptures that are no longer really available in most translations. And so, as we know, the Catholic Church has been in control for a very long time. And we believe that there's a reason they removed these books, because they don't want us to have access to that and the wonderful scripture that is found within it. So do check that out if you are unfamiliar with some of these uncanonized books. They are truly wonderful and sometimes shed even more light on the Old Testament, the Torah that we do know so well. So that has, like I said, inspired my talk today. And I've actually, let me go ahead and pull it up so we know what we're talking about. Through fire and flames, this life can be a trial of fire. It can get very difficult. The heat can get turned up in our lives. It's a very pressurized thing to where, are we going to survive? Are we going to thrive through this no matter what comes our way? And I truly do feel that this life is but a test. Are we going to be able to endure? Are we going to be able to give yahuah the glory and praise him through the pain of whatever comes our direction? Whether it be from him and be considered a little bit of chastisement to get us back on the right track, or it be from the adversary to test us with temptation. We know Job was a man of Yah, and Yah allowed Hasatan, the adversary, to test him in many ways. Loss of just about every earthly possession, including family. So we may be going through those things. We may not understand why this is happening. This doesn't seem fair. I've been faithful to you, Father. I pray, I help people out. I do all these wonderful things. My life is still so difficult. Enduring, that is the key. We must endure. We don't get a free pass from difficult trials in life. And we just have to continue to trust him and lean on him, knowing that he will get us through, no matter the temperature, no matter the size of the fire or the size of the storm. He is in control of the elements. I like to look at it that way. He has a plan. He has a purpose, and he will carry you through. All right. So the word fire, to me, automatically brings to mind something that is not comfortable. In some cases, the word fire strikes fear into the hearts. Fire is known for its ability to bring destruction and damage to structures, even loss of life. Everything in its path can face destruction. Fire is no friend to the flesh because of the pain and the agony that it inflicts. Fire burns, as some have had to learn the hard way. It can leave scars even that we have to carry with us for the rest of our lives. Growing pains is kind of how I like to call that. Nobody likes to be burned, and nobody likes to be in the fire. Spiritually speaking, fire is what yahuah uses to refine his children, to burn off those elements or impurities about us that are not like him, those character flaws, ones that are not of him, that are of the world. Yahuah uses fire to chasten us when we stray away from him. And yahuah uses fire to keep us humbly on our knees, to bring us to a place in him where he can use us for his glory. We ought not to complain all the time when yahuah puts us in the fire, because it is this place, the place of fire, that yahuah has made some of his most faithful saints, servants, followers. Ask anybody that has done great things for yahuah, somebody that yahuah is using in a mighty way, and they will more than likely tell you that it was in the fire that they saw his glory. It is there in the fire that yahuah lifted them up and out of it. So I'm going to share Jasher 12. If you're familiar with it or not, is really amazing. And it's going to remind you of another familiar story that we see in the Old Testament as well. But I was not even familiar that this happened to Abraham. And so I wanted to share as an encouragement for all that are going through difficulties. This is going to be chapter 12. I believe I'm reading 1 through 43. And when the king heard the words of Abraham, before his name was changed by the father, he ordered him to be put into prison. And Abram was 10 days in prison. And at the end of those days, the king ordered that all the kings, princes, and governors of different provinces and of the sages should come before him. And they sat before him, and Abram was still in the house of confinement. And the king said to the princes and sages, "Have you heard what Abram, the son of Terach, has done to his father? Thus has he done to him. And I ordered him to be brought before me, and thus he has spoken. His heart did not misgive him, neither did he stir in my presence. And behold, now he is confined in the prison. And therefore decide what judgment is due to this man who reviled the king, who spoke and did all the things that you heard." And they all answered the king, saying, "The man who reviles the king should be hanged upon a tree. But having done all the things that he said, and having despised our Elohim, lowercase God, he must therefore be burned to death. For this is the law in this matter. If it pleases the king to do this, let him order his servants to kindle a fire both night and day in your brick furnace, and then we will cast this man into it." And the king did so, and he commanded his servants that they should prepare a fire for 3 days and 3 nights in the king's furnace. Then the Kasdim and the king ordered them to take Abram from prison and bring him out to be burned. And all the king's servants, princes, Adanim, governors, and judges, all the inhabitants of the land, about 900,000 men, stood opposite the furnace to see Abram. And all the women and the little ones crowded upon the roofs and towers to see what was doing with Abraham. And they all stood together at a distance, and there was not a man left that did not come on that day to behold the scene. And when Abram was come, the conjurers of the king and the Sages saw Abram, and they cried out to the king, saying, Our sovereign Adonai, surely this is the man whom we know to have been the child at whose birth the great star swallowed the 4 stars, which we declared to the king now 50 years since. And behold, now his father has also transgressed your commands and mocked you by bringing you another child, which you did kill. And when the king heard their words, he was exceedingly wroth, and he ordered Ruach to be brought before him. And the king said, Have you heard what the conjurers have spoken? Now tell me truly, how did you? And if you shall speak truth, you shall be acquitted. Starting to sound familiar to another story we know. And seeing that the king's anger was so much kindled, Ruach said to the king, My Adonai and king, you have heard the truth, and what the Sages have spoken is right. And the king said, How could you do this thing, to transgress my orders, and to give me a child that you did not beget, and to take value for him? And Ruach answered the king, Because my tender feelings were excited for my son at that time, and I took a son of my handmaid, and I brought him to the king. And the king said, Who advised you to this? Tell me, do not hide aught from me, and then you shall not die. And Ruach was greatly terrified in the king's presence. And he said to the king, It was Haran, my eldest son, who advised me to this. And Haran was in those days that Abram was born, 32 years old. But Haran did not advise his father to anything, for Ruach said this to the king in order to deliver his soul from the king, for he feared greatly. And the king said to Ruach, Haran your son, who advised you to this, shall die through fire with Abram, for the sentence of death is upon him for having rebelled against the king's desires in doing this thing. And Haran at that time felt inclined to follow the way of Abram, but he kept it within himself. And Haran said in his heart, Behold, now the king has seized Abram on account of these things which Abram did. And it shall come to pass that if Abram prevail over the king, I will follow him. But if the king prevail, I will go after the king. And when Ruach had spoken this to the king concerning Haran his son, the king ordered Haran to be seized with Abram. And they brought them both, Abram and Haran his brother, to cast them into the fire. And all the inhabitants of the land, and the king's servants and princes, and all the women and little ones were there, standing that day over them. And the king's servants took Abram and his brother, and they stripped them of all their clothes, excepting their lower garments, which were upon them. And they bound their hands and feet with linen cords. And the servants of the king lifted them up, and cast them both into the furnace. And yahuah loved Abram, and had compassion over him. And yahuah came down, and delivered Abram from the fire, and he was not burned. But all the cords which they bound him were burned. With Abram remained, and walked about in the fire. And Haran died when they had cast him into the fire, and he was burned to ashes, for his heart was not perfect with yahuah. And those men who cast him into the fire, the flame of the fire spread over them, and they burned, and 12 men of them died. And Abram walked in the midst of the fire 3 days and 3 nights. And all the servants of the king saw him walking in the fire. And they came and told the king, saying, Behold, we have seen Abram walking about in the midst of the fire, and even the lower garments which are upon him are not burned, but the cord which he was bound is burned. And when the king heard their words, his heart fainted, and he would not believe them. So he sent other faithful princes to see this matter, and they went and saw it, and told it to the king. And the king rose to go and see it. And he saw Avram walking to and fro in the midst of the fire. And he saw Haran's body burned, and the king wondered greatly. And the king ordered Avram to be taken out from the fire. And his servants approached to take him out, and they could not, for the fire was round about, and the flame ascending toward them from the furnace. And the king's servants fled from it. And the king rebuked them, saying, Make haste and bring Avram out of the fire, that you shall not die. And the servants of the king again approached to bring Avram out. And the flames came upon them and burned their faces, so that 8 of them died. When the king saw that his servants could not approach the fire, lest they should be burned, the king called to Avram, O servant of the Elohim who is in heaven, go forth from amidst the fire, and come hither before me. And Avram hearkened to the voice of the king, and he went forth from the fire, and came and stood before the king. And when Avram came out, the king and all his servants saw Abraham coming before the king, with his lower garments upon him, for they were not burned, but the cord with which he was bound was burned. And the king said to Avram, How is it that you were not burned in the fire? And Avram said to the king, The Elohim of heaven and earth, in whom I trust, and who has all in his power, he delivered me from the fire, into which you did cast me. And Haran, the brother of Avram, was burned to ashes, and they sought for his body, and they found it consumed. And Haran was 82 years old when he died in the fire of Kasdim. And the king, princes, and inhabitants of the land, seeing that Avram was delivered from the fire, they came and bowed down to Avram. And Avram said to them, Do not bow down to me, but bow down to the Elohim of the world who made you, and serve him, and go in his ways, for it is he who delivered me from out of this fire. And it is he who created the souls and ruach of all men, and formed man in his mother's womb, and brought him forth into the world. And it is he who will deliver those who trust in him from all pain. And this thing seemed very wonderful in the eyes of the king and princes, that Avram was saved from the fire, and that Haran was burned. And the king gave Avram many presents, and he gave him 2 head servants from the king's house. The name of one was Ani, and the name of the other was Eliezer. And all the kings, princes, and servants gave Avram many gifts of silver and gold and pearl. And the king and his princes sent him away, and he went in peace. And Avram went forth from the king in peace, and many of the king's servants followed him, and about 300 men joined him. And Abraham returned on that day, and went to his father's house, he and the men that followed him. And Abraham served Yahuah Eloheinu all the days of his life, and he walked in his ways and followed his Torah. And from that day forward, Abraham inclined the hearts of the sons of men to serve Yahuah. Such a powerful story. I really enjoyed that reading through it the other day. It just really brought so much joy and encouragement to me, knowing that, for one, whether it be the physical fire, Yahuah has the ability to save you from the heat, save you from the flames, if it be his will, if your heart has been favoring him, if you have been focused on him. living for him, he can allow you to endure through any flame, physical, mental, or spiritual. I also see this as a connection to the world we're living in now. The gospel, the word of our Father and Son, is not popular. It's rebuked by many. It's looked down upon, persecuted. In a way, we will be dealing with our own fire, our own persecution, just for upholding the scriptures, just for wanting to obey the Father and his Son, Messiah, just to live a good and righteous light, to bear good fruit to the world. So when we are doing that, we may be thrown into the fire, but Yah will allow us to endure. I wanted to share a couple of verses to finish it up. Isaiah 43, 1 and 2. But now, thus says Yahuwah, that created you, O Yaakov, and he that formed you, O Israel, fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by your name. You are mine. When you pass through the waters, I will be with you, and through the rivers, they shall not overflow you. And when you walk through the fire, you shall not be burned, neither shall the flame kindle upon you. We need that fire to build us up into a person Yahuwah wants us to be. The fire is not there to burn us, but to prepare us. It is there to help us build character. It is there to build resilience. It is there to make our faith stronger. And when we read even a similar story with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, not willing to bend their knee to Nebuchadnezzar, to stand against the world, the king, the authority and power. Maybe that ends up being the Antichrist, the mark of the beast, whatever it ends up being. We must stand against it, refuse to bow our knee, only bowing our knee humbly to the Father in heaven. So these are very similar stories, and I think just another example of how we must trust Yah, that he will get us through those fires. We can see that even his undergarments were not burned, yet the cord bounding him in the fire was burned away. And I see that as the shackles and chains of the world that were burnt off by trusting the Father and knowing that he would allow you to endure. Abraham knew that he would endure through that, and the Father was with him that whole time. 3 days and 3 nights. Very interesting number we see there too. Just great connections all the way around. So that's all I have today. I hope this was an encouragement. I hope you realize that no matter what you're going through, the Father loves you. He has compassion for you. He does not want you to hurt and be depressed and feel alone. He is always there. Lean on him. Let him guide you, because this world is going to continue to get hotter. The flames are going to get taller and wider. We must endure, knowing that he will prevail. The victory is already won. I want to be on his side. I want you to be on his side too. So please do share this message if you enjoyed it. We would love your support if you would subscribe to our channel. We're just trying to get this message out to the sheep, the lost sheep. My prayer each and every day is that the message I share can just be found in the one lost sheep, maybe that has gone astray or that doesn't even know the Father himself. We are searching for the lost. We are also helping encourage the ones that are already on the walk. We all need that encouragement. We all need help being lifted up from time to time, because the world is constantly placing stumbling blocks in front of us. And so just remember, brothers and sisters, endure until the end. Shalom and blessings on your week.